boys and girls, from me, Henry, and Nibber. Now don't forget, if you like today's video, press the like button, ring the bell, and hit subscribe. Remember, it costs you nothing to subscribe, and you will be the first to know when I, Henry, bring out my latest video. Now children, are we snuggled in? If so, we shall begin. Today's story is called The Six Swans. The story of a king who, lost in the dark forest, meets a wicked witch and asked her for directions home. Once upon a time, a king hunting in a great forest chased a wild boar so eagerly that none of his people could follow him. When evening came, he stopped to look about him and saw that he had lost himself completely. He sought everywhere for a way out of the wood, but could find none. Then he perceived coming towards him an old woman whose head kept constantly shaking. She was a witch. "My good woman," said he to her, "cannot you show me the way through the woods?" "Oh yes, your majesty," answered she, "that I can, but only on one condition, and that is if you do not agree to it, you will never get out, and you must die here of hunger." "Oh dear me," thought the king, "what's the condition?" "I have an only daughter," she said. "She is beautiful as anyone could find in the wide world, and well deserved to be your wife. If you will make her your own queen, I will show you the way out of the woods." The king, in fear of his heart, consented, and the old woman led him to her house, where her daughter sat by the fire. She received the king as if she had to expect him, and he saw that she was very beautiful, but still she did not please him, and he could not look at her without a secret shudder. After he had lifted up the maiden beside him on his horse, the old woman showed him the way. When the king arrived at his royal castle, where the wedding was celebrated, he had been married once before and had by his first wife 7 children, 6 boys and a girl, whom he loved more than anything in the world. But because he was afraid of the new stepmother, she might not treat them well, or might even do them some harm, so he took them to a lonely castle which stood in the middle of a wood. It was so hidden, and the road was so difficult to find, that he himself would not have to find it, if a wise woman had not given him a wonderful skein of thread, which when he threw it down before him, unrolled itself out and showed him the way. The king went out so often to his dear children that the queen noticed his absence, and was full of curiosity to know what business took him thus alone in the wood. So she gave her servant a sum of money, and they told her the secret, and also told her of the skein of cloth, which was the only thing that could show the way. After that she never rested till she had found out where the king kept the skein. Then she made some little white silk shirts, and as she had learned witchcraft from her mother, she sewed a spell into every one of them. And one day when the king was gone out to hunt, she took the little shirts and went into the wood with the skein showing her the way. The 6 brothers who saw someone in the distance thought their dear father was coming and ran to meet him full of joy. As they approached, the queen threw one of the shirts over each of them, and when the shirts touched their bodies, they were changed into swans and flew away over the wood. The witch's daughter went home quite happy and thought she'd got rid of all her stepchildren. But the little one girl who had not run out with her brothers and the queen knew all about her. Next day the king came to joyfully visit his children, but he found nobody except the little sister. "Where are your brothers?" he asked. "Oh, dear father," she answered, "they are gone and they've left me alone." And then she told him all she had seen out of her window. Now her brothers were turned into swans and had flown away over the wood. She also showed him the feathers which they had dropped into the courtyard, and when she had picked them up. The king was very grieved, but he never thought that the queen had done this wicked deed. However, because he dreaded lest the little girl would be stolen from him likewise, he wished to take her away with him. But she was afraid of the stepmother and begged the king to let her stay one night more in the castle in the wood. The poor little girl thought, "I cannot rest here any longer. I will go back to look for my brothers." And when that night came, she ran away and went straight into the wood. She went on all through the night and the next day too, till she was so tired that she could go no further. Then she saw a little house and went in and found a room with 6 little beds. She did not dare lie down in any but crept under one of them, laid herself on the hard floor and meant to pass the night there. But when the sun was just about going to set, she heard a rustling, and 6 swans came flying in at the window. They sat down on the floor and blew at one another and blew all their feathers off and took off the swans' skins like shirts. The little girl saw them and recognized her brothers and was very, very glad and crept out from under the bed. The brothers were no less rejoiced when they saw their little sister, but their joy did not last long. "You cannot stop here," they said to her. "This is a house belonging to the robbers. If they come home and find you, they will kill you." "Cannot you protect me?" asked the little sister. "No," answered they. "We can only take off our swan skins for a quarter of an hour every evening and have our natural shape for that time. But afterwards, we all turn back into swans again." The little sister cried and said, "Cannot you be released?" "Oh, no," answered they. "The conditions are too hard. You must not speak or laugh for 6 years, and must make us for 6 years shirts out of stitched weed during that time. If while you're making them, a single word comes from your mouth, all your work will be of no use." When her brothers had said this, the quarter of the hour was over, and they turned back into swans again. They then flew back out of the window. But the little girl made a firm resolution to release her brothers, even if it cost her her life. She left the house and went into the middle of the wood and climbed up in a tree and spent the night there. The next morning she got down, collected a quantity of stitchweed and began to sew. She could not speak to anyone. She did not want to laugh, so she sat and only looked at her work. When she'd been there a long time, it happened the king of the country was hunting in the wood, and his hunters came to the tree on which the little girl sat. They called to her and said, "Who are you?" She gave them no answer. "Come down to us," they said. "We will not do you any harm." But she only shook her head as they kept teasing her with questions. She drew them down to her gold necklace and thought they would be satisfied with that. But they did not leave off, so she threw her sash down to them. And as that was no good either, she threw down her garters. And at last everything that she had on and could spare, so that she had nothing left but her shift. But the hunters still would not be sent away. She climbed up a tree and brought down the little girl and took her to the king. The king asked, "Who are you? What are you doing up in the tree?" But she did not answer. He asked her, it is all languages that you know, but she remained as dumb as a fish. But because she was beautiful, the king's heart was moved, and he fell deeply in love with her. He wrapped his cloak around her, took her before him on a horse, and brought her to his castle. There he had her dressed in rich clothes, and she shone in her beauty like bright sunshine, but could not get a word out of her. He sat her by him at the table, and her modest looks and proper behaviour pleased him very much. He said, "I will marry you," and no other else in the world, and after a few days he was married to her. But the king had a wicked mother, who was not pleased with his marriage, and spoke ill of the young queen. "You know where this girl comes from," she said. "She cannot speak. She is not good enough for the king." A year after, when the queen brought her first child into the world, the old mother took it away and smeared her mouth with blood while she slept. Then she went to the king and accused her eating her child. The king would not believe it and would not let anyone do any harm, and she always sat and sewed the shirts and took no notice of anything else. Next time she had another beautiful baby, the wicked stepmother did the same as before, but the king could not resolve to believe what she said. He said, "My wife is too pious and good to do such a thing. If she was not dumb and she could defend herself, her innocence would be made clear." But when the first time the old woman took away the newborn child and accused the queen, who could not say a word in her own defence, the king would not help her, and he was forced to give her up to court of justice, and she was condemned to suffer death by fire. When the day came upon the sentence was to be executed, it was exactly the last day of the 6 years in which she might not speak or laugh, and she had freed her dear brothers from the power of this spell. The 6 little shirts was finished, except that the last one, a sleeve, was weary. When she came to the palace of execution, she laid the shirts on her arm, and when she stood at the stake and the fire was just going to be lit, she looked around, and there came 6 swans flying through the air. Then her heart leapt with joy, for she saw that the deliverance was near. The swans flew to her and crouched down, so they could throw the shirts over themselves. As soon as the shirt was touched by the swans skins fell off, and her brothers stood before her. They were all grown up and strong and handsome. Only the youngest had no left arm, but instead of it, a swan's wing. They hugged and kissed their sisters many, many times. And then the queen went to the king and began to speak and said, "Dearest husband, now I may speak and declare to you that I am innocent and falsely accused." And she told him about the deceit of the old woman who had taken away her 3 children and hidden them. However, they were soon fetched safely back to the great joy of the king, and the wicked mother-in-law was tied to a stake and burnt to ashes. But the queen with their 6 brothers lived on for many, many years in peace and happiness. Well, children, wasn't that a lovely story? So, from me, Henry, and Nipper, nighty-night, children, nighty-night, nighty-night.